What up, what up, and welcome to another episode of Water for the Thirsty, where it's the word simply, the word refreshing. I'm the facilitator of the conversations, it's Jared, and with us we've got Lauren, uh, who is in North Carolina, and Jerry, who's down in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are here to chop it up, talk a little bit about the stuff we've been reading in our Bible reading plan this week, and then see where the spirit and the conversation goes from there. Since last we met, we closed out Matthew, got into Hebrews, closed out Isaiah, talked a little bit about the kings between Isaiah and Hosea, and then jumped into Hosea. And then, of course, we read the Psalms, Kenrick's favorite book of the Bible. So tonight, we got a few questions queued up from Lorraine from where we were last, Matthew, Hebrews, and I think you got something from Isaiah. No, just Matthew and Hebrews. What did you have from all three?
No, just
Just
Matthew and Hebrews.
All right, cool.
Isaiah was more of like a reflection thing.
All right. Courtney is with us, but he is working out a little camera issue there, and so he's going to be with us in a second. All right. Chat. All right, cool. So feel free to join our conversation, Lauren. Kick us off. Tell us what you've been thinking about since last we read.
I don't know which one to start with.
Start with the first one you shared with me. Let's go in that
Okay.
order.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
we'll go in the order you went in when you told me about what you had in mind.
Okay. All right. So the first one was Matthew 18, verse 13 to 19,
Yeah.
and particularly verse 17.
All right. You said from 13 to 19?
Yeah, Matthew 18. I think it was 13 to 19. I'm pulling it up. But particularly verse 17.
Mm.
Oh no, sorry, 15 to 19. Sorry.
15 to 19. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we got Courtney with us. Yeah, welcome, Courtney.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got our reading assignment for today?
I just heard Matthew chapter 15. I didn't get the other part.
Oh,
Matthew
18.
18.
15 to 19, and then particularly verse 17.
Okay. Easy. All right, I'm over there.
Hugh and Courtney to read.
It's the least I could do. No problem.
What's the question, Lauren?
So my question was, what does verse 17 mean?
All right. I just wanted to put that up there so people can follow along with us.
Okay, so I guess I could write it better. What does treat the person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector mean? That's the real question. If you want to write it all the way up.
I'm gonna leave it with verse 17.
Okay.
All right. But Courtney, we on you when you're ready.
Okay. All right. So 15 through 19. It says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. But if you are unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again, so that everything you say may be confirmed by two or three witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then, if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. I tell you the truth, whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. I also tell you this, if two of you agree here on earth concerning anything you ask, my Father in heaven will do it for you.
Mhm. So the question is, verse 17, what does that mean? Jerry, what does 17 mean? Or what did your dad say?
He didn't, that I recall.
That's not one you got to ask him.
Yeah, if we just look at it from a secular perspective, I mean, it's like, they say that two things you fear, God and the IRS, right? So, I guess in that perspective, if you're treating the person like a tax collector, you're gonna like, because generally with tax collectors, auditors, you tell them exactly what they ask you to tell them, nothing more, nothing less. So it's almost like it's like a work to rule, right? You're keeping your distance, you're not being very engaged. Um, it's almost like the level before, when God said if you go into a city and you witness to them and they don't take your
You dust
you dust it off, you dust your feet off. To me, it comes across like, all right, well, that's the level right before dusting your feet off, where you just like X them out. But this is like getting there. You're just like keeping your distance, not very engaged. I mean, that's
How much, Courtney, what do you know? What are your thoughts? Let me ask it this way. What are your thoughts there? What's your understanding of that? Or does your Bible say anything there?
I guess, and I guess I'm really thinking about like what is heathen and tax collector mean? Like what are their? I guess in my mind, I'm thinking about their standing in the community. I think I kind of got a idea from people like I'm drawing a blank. My man in the tree, sycamore tree.
Matthew Levi.
Zacchaeus.
Yeah.
Zacchaeus.
So I just think that tax collectors seem to be, I won't say looked down on. Maybe they weren't even really invited to participate in the society on the same level as everyone else.
And was Matthew a tax collector too? Wasn't he?
Matthew was a tax collector.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the interesting thing though, Jared, just before you go on, is like, on one hand, it seems to suggest, it's like I said, it's almost like, excommunication, persona non grata, but then you have a tax collector who's one of the disciples, and then look at how Jesus deals with Zacchaeus, right? So it's like,
right. This is why I was confused.
What does it mean?
That's why I'm confused.
does it mean love on them? Yeah. But to answer your question, Lauren, though, we kind of had to go back from the beginning of the chapter because there's a continuing thought. And then the ironic thing is, to what Jerry is saying, the very next thing after he says that is, well, he responds to a question from Peter, right? Like the next thing is Peter, after Jesus makes a statement, Peter goes, well, so what am I supposed to do here, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus then gives another story that says something else. So let's see if we can look at what's being said in its totality from the beginning of Matthew 18 and then see if that helps us to better answer what Jesus is saying here and why. Let's go with Matthew 18:1.
Okay. About that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus called the little child to him and put the child among them. Then he said, "I tell you the truth, unless you turn from your sins and become like little children, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. So anyone who becomes as humble as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And anyone who welcomes a child like this on my behalf is welcoming me. But if you cause one of these little ones who trusts in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. What sorrow awaits the world because it tempts people to sin. Temptations are inevitable, but what sorrow awaits the person who does the tempting? So if your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better to enter eternal life with only one hand or one foot than to be thrown into eternal fire with both of your hands and feet. And if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better to enter eternal life with only one eye than to have two eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. Beware that you don't look down on any of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels are always in the presence of my heavenly Father. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others on the hills and go out and search for the one that is lost? And if he finds it, I tell you the truth, he will rejoice over it more than over the 99 that didn't wander away. In the same way, it is not my heavenly Father's will that even one of these little ones should perish. If another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. But if you are unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again, so that everything you say may be confirmed by two or three witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then, if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. I tell you the truth, whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. I also tell you this, if two of you agree here on earth concerning anything you ask, my Father in heaven will do it for you. For where two or three are gathered together as my followers, I am there among them. Then Peter came to him and asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. He couldn't pay, so his master ordered that he be sold along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned to pay the debt. But the man fell down before his master and begged him, Please be patient with me, and I will pay it all. Then his master was filled with pity for him, and he released him and forgave his debt. But when the man left the king, he went to his fellow servant who had owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged him for a little more time. Be patient with me and I will pay it, he pleaded. But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. Then the king called the man he had forgiven and said, You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? Then the evil king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. That's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart.
All right. So we ended up. Hey, Trisha, welcome. Good to see you. Glad you made it back.
I guess y'all thought y'all chased me off, huh?
Oh, I
Not
don't know,
that
man.
lucky.
I don't know. I'm
No,
glad to know that
sir.
is not the case.
She's
That's
back.
So Lauren is asking about Matthew 18. She was looking at 15 through 19 and with emphasis on verse 17 as we had up on the screen
Exit
before. But when we
let
looked at
me-
it and we started exploring the whole tax collector pagan thing and how they were treated, how we understood them to be treated, or how we think we understood them to be treated, I suggested we go back and read the chapter from the beginning and then read it all the way to the end and then see if we could make more sense of what's being said in the chapter based on what was being said, because this statement is being made in the context of a larger point or a larger set of points. So let's see if we could identify what those larger sets of points are. I'll say that, on the surface, just reading this chapter by itself, it kind of looks like Jesus is all over the place. It doesn't look like a coherent thought on the surface, but I'm asking if you see a coherent thought, Lorraine, from Jesus here in Matthew chapter 18.
So I see like two sections. Like the first section.
Is your Bible laid out in two sections, or do you see
Well,
two
I'm saying
sections?
that's what I'm seeing. So
Okay.
because I can't link. So the one with the children, I have disconnected from the rest. Like the part where it talks about the lost sheep, and I don't know if I'm gonna be reading too much into this. So he talked about if he loses one, he'll go to find that one and leave the 99, right? And when he got to the correcting your believer part, it made me think of the one that's out there. Because he said when you go to him and try to talk to him about whatever, if he confesses, then you've gained him back. So I feel like that's like that finding that lost sheep, right? And then
So
when
there are
you
two
go,
sections.
well, those two I can put together, right?
Oh, okay. And you can't.
Right.
Which sections you can't put together?
And the first part about the children, I don't know how to mesh that into the rest.
Verse 10.
Like,
no
so
happen?
from verse 1 to 10, I don't know how to mesh that with the rest of it. So the lost sheep,
So
you go out to find
do me a favor. There are two verses in there that do some connecting. Verse 6 connects 6 through 9 to 1 through 5. And verse 10 connects verses 6 through 9 and 1 through 5 together to 10 through 14. Do you see that?
You said a whole lot of numbers just now, Jared. Okay.
Verse 6 and verse 10.
Verse 6
Verse
and
6
verse
is-
10.
Yes, verse 6 is a
Okay.
connector verse from all that goes before it into the next thought. And verse 10 is a connector verse from all that went before it to the next thought.
Okay.
Do
Okay.
you see
Okay.
that?
Hold on.
You said.
Oh,
you
so
said
they're
you're-
talking about like just leaving them out there and not going to find, like verse 6. It says, "But if you cause one of these who trust in me to fall into sin," I guess you could look at the correcting part, like letting them just go without.
6 is connected to 5, 1 through 5. So he made 1 through 5, and then he follows up with a follow-on thought.
Oh,
with
so
verse
6 is the connector and 10 is a connector. Is that
Correct.
what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Then let me read it again.
Trisha, you want to say something while Lauren is reading?
I forgot what it was. Don't worry about it. It'll come back. But while she's looking for that, I will say that I don't really read. I didn't read this as something that was connecting. I read them as their own individual parables.
Yeah.
I think that for me, I read them that they all had similar themes and they were very community and people based, but they were all just separate little stories.
It feels like random little, like proverbs almost, right?
Nuggets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think they're random. I wouldn't say that. I don't think that they're random.
But disconnected, disjoint.
Maybe.
Mm.
But I think that, again, I think that the theme of people and how we should be stewarding people is the theme of the entire chapter.
How we should be stewarding people.
Yeah, how we
Tell me
should
more.
be. Okay, so basically, when I look at this and I see it, I think about like what our attitude needs to be when we're, because in church we always talk about like backsliders and people who come to church on a regular and things like that. And I think within these parables or stories, if you will, for me, I see how the type of mentality that we should have when it comes to somebody who's a quote unquote non-believer who doesn't believe like we do.
Mm.
Like there should
Okay.
be, they're just as valuable as the people that are
Where did
inside
you
the
get the
church.
sense of an unbeliever in this?
Not necessarily like, okay, so
I'm not saying that it isn't there. I'm just wondering where you know.
that for me is like the parable of the lost sheep.
Okay.
Like that's where I would take out something like that.
An unbeliever is
A believer or somebody who used to believe and then they left.
got it. Got it.
So, but for me, it's either one. I'm not saying that you would see that there, but like for me,
I
that's what I
get
get when I see it. When I
I
read it, I'm like, it's either somebody who's in the church, quote unquote, or outside of the church, because those are not like things that I necessarily ascribe to per se, but like the mentality of how we should be dealing or stewarding, like I said earlier, these individuals.
Gotcha.
To me, it just says like they're just as valuable and just as important.
Got it. I can see that. Jerry, I see your brain working over there, boy. I see it working. While Lorraine is making them connections, so I'll give us space to make those
I
connections.
was yeah, I was taking some of the making some of the connections that Tracy was making as well. Where I'm still having a challenge is which thought is it? Is it because on one hand it's like I am seeing where okay, this is stewarding people. This is how you and stewarding all persons, believers, backsliders, whatever have you, right? The difficulty for me is like okay, on one hand it seems like he's saying steward them really well up to a point where they seem to be um, taking for granted or ignoring or whatever your overtures, right? It's kind of like they say don't cast pearl before swine.
Mm-hmm.
So he's giving you like some demarcation, and then he's saying, "Nah, 70 times 7, just keep at it." So I was wondering if is it a case of him saying, "Keep loving them, keep praying for them," but out of wisdom, edit or adjust your interaction and engagement with them
Mm-hmm.
because he hasn't given up on
I would
them.
agree with,
So you can keep
yeah, I
praying
would
for
agree
them
with
and
that,
whatnot,
Jerome.
but don't.
That's an interesting thought. I will be adversarial in this moment and say that's a very small section of the chapter, though. Like the whole chapter has more. Like there's a bigger slant to the chapter,
Uh-huh.
and that is a small part of it,
Yeah.
and not even an emphasis point.
Yeah. Little
And
foxes spoil the grapes, right?
actually, that part is almost part of the bigger emphasis point, and not to the. I would say not in the way that you guys are framing it, but I'm still listening as we wait for Laurie. How about you, Courtney? While Lauren's still working. For those of you who join us, we listening. We are in Matthew 18. Lauren had a question about verse 15 through 19. Dealing with sin in the church is the section that is labeled in my Bible, and she had a question about verse 17 in terms of what does it mean to treat them like a pagan or tax collector. We tried to answer that question in those verses, leveraging those verses, but I then suggested we go back and read the entire chapter. So now we're looking at the entire chapter and seeing what's the overall point. Before we answer the question, we're trying to ask what's the overall point that Jesus is making here. What are these thoughts disjoint or related, and are they strung together to make a larger point, or are they just points all over the place, or other? And so Lorraine said she started to see a connection between verses 10 to the end. And so I was saying, well, all of it is connected. Consider verses 6 and 10 as connected verses to pull all of it and make it one continuous thought. And so she's looking that over. But in the meantime, I'm asking, what do you see as the overall point? Kenrick, you're up late at Game Boy. No, you look like you're in Maryland.
Yeah, I just got in.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us, even though you're just making yourself at home. Welcome back. Hopefully you caught all that I was saying there, so you know where we are as I go to Courtney.
Completely clueless, but it's fine.
All right, cool. We'll catch you up again after.
I see a thought. I see it and using.
Courtney, we're in Matthew 18. In the meanwhile, we're in Matthew 18.
All right.
Yeah. I was just saying, like, I see a thought. I see it's just like Jesus just weaving these things together. I kind of look at it like he's breaking it down kind of like into steps. Like if the first question is about greatness in the kingdom of God, I think the first part is he's basically breaking down humility, using the child as an example. And then even talking about this kind of a mutilation part as well. So again, just kind of more of a like transformation. So you what's greatness in that sense? He's just talking about kind of having to change your mindset to be humble like this child. And this is a part of the what we're supposed to be striving for, and disciples in this regard. It's not about this status. It's about actually being humble like a child. And then from there, I see that there's this portion about talking about just agreeing and having and unity with your brother. And then I see the next part, which to me would lead to the next part, being able to forgive your brother in the way that God is forgiving you. So you're like modeling God's forgiveness with your own brother. You know what I mean? So I think it's like, all right, this is a frame that you a mind frame that you need to have. And if you start from this part, you work yourself down here to get to this point that I'm trying to show you what is ideally the character of Christ in that sense. Like that's what I'm seeing. Like we start from here and I'm showing you what should be happening to. This is sort of a transformation of your mind, a transformation which would then help you to relate to your neighbor, your brother, a different way, which would allow you to then, when he's talking about all this type of forgiveness.
Cool, Courtney. I'm with you. I'm gonna show you in a bit how I'm with you.
Right.
But I want to free Kenrick's mind. We're trying to answer the question, what is Jesus saying in verse 17? And so we're reading the whole chapter to get the entire point of the chapter to see if that could help us walk back into 17.
I was trying to read Arabic over here. I don't know this.
I was able to hide it in Facebook, but I can't do anything with it here. I can't even remove it from here. So just
go ahead. It's distracting.
No, disregard that. Lauren, you look like you found the connection or have given up on finding the connection.
So I made a connection, but I don't know the connection. So my only thought was the fact that he used a child as the example, right? So children are more trusting and forgiving, right? You do things to them and they're usually more like, it's okay. Like they'll be sad, but they'll get over it. Like they don't hold on to it and harbor it and that kind of thing. And he's basically telling you to be like that, right? So then it said, he said, so anyone who becomes as humble as this child is greatest in the kingdom, right? And so when I think of a child, that's what I imagine, right? But then it says, then it mentions how the world, woe to the world because the world tempts people to sin. And then it says, somewhere it says something about the person that causes one of these, meaning the children, meaning the people who are forgiving and trusting and those kinds of things, or have those qualities. But then I'm disconnected with the foot and the leg and the arm. They lost me there. But then there's still that forgiveness that continues, because if you have this spirit of forgiveness in you, then you will go out to find that brother who has hurt you or has done something against you in an effort to reconcile them back to you, like children do, right? Children will give you chance after chance after chance after chance after chance. And then, you know, that brings into that correcting the believer part. Like you're trying to reconcile, so you'll go out and you have that conversation. And then the debt, the king who forgave the debt, and then the person went back and did opposite. The forgiveness they were shown, they didn't show it back to the person that hurt them. So
I got you.
But I see forgiveness as a theme, but
forgiveness as a theme. Okay. Garrick, you're kind of with us. Are you able to contribute yet?
Well, what was the original? I guess what's the question?
The original question is, what is meant by verse 17? Treat them as a pagan or tax collector. That was the original question. We're still trying to answer that question, but we're reading the whole chapter to see if we can figure out what the answer to that question is by evaluating what's being said here by Jesus in the entire chapter. Like, what is he saying? What's the point that he's making? And what we started to notice is that it feels like he's saying several things. He's saying a lot of things rather than one cogent thought. As Trisha kind of pointed out, you know, there's some connections, but these things are loosely connected and not really part of a coherent singular thought. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this. Jerry is seeing somewhat of a connection. Courtney saw somewhat of a connection. Lauren is trying to make the connection and is, you know, there in the spirit of connection. And now we're here with you. What is Jesus saying, so that we can get to what does he mean by that statement? Because I guess what that he means in that statement is going to be informed by what he's saying overall.
Because 17 gives me the impression of a negative response to someone who is not willing to reconcile. But I'm like, throughout the Bible, he tells you to treat people a certain kind of way, which doesn't, that verse just stands different from what all the other things he's told people about treating each other. And so I was like, maybe I'm misreading, maybe I'm understanding that verse to mean something negative when maybe it's not necessarily.
So I'll say this. When I read that and I see that, I don't take it as a negative. I take it as, you know, because the verse says, and if he refuses to hear you, tell it to the church. But if he refuses to hear the church, let him be like a heathen and a tax collector. So to me, when I hear that, I hear, and this, again, this is just my idea. I don't think it's something negative per se. I think that God, Jesus, whoever we call him, is a God of boundaries, right? And I think that I have love for you, right? And I care about you, but this relationship has boundaries. And so if I've done everything that I can, right, to, like he said earlier, to reconcile the relationship or to make something right or to, you know, make it better, right? Because I'm not of the belief that reconciliation means relations, that we should be back in a relationship together. It just simply means reconciliation. So if I am trying my best to reconcile the relationship and bring some sort of like closure or forgiveness or whatever to the relationship, and that person's not open to it, then what that says to me is that I've done my part and I'm free to move on. So it makes me think of the other verses that were further along when I don't remember which disciple was saying it, but it's like, if I go into the city and I'm trying to preach to you and they don't want to hear it, dust it off from your feet and keep it moving because you've done your part. So I don't see that as like a negative thing. I see that as this is the outline for how you should treat, a relationship that may have soured. And when you've done your part, you are free to move on. And the ball is now in their court, but you're no longer responsible for what they do. So to me, I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a way of Jesus giving us boundaries on how we should be interacting with people that we may have problems with.
I got you.
I agree.
I
It's
like that. Yeah.
but it's just the treat them like a pagan. How are pagans? I guess that's the part I was stuck on. How are pagans being
So for
treated?
me, I think that when I hear that, how the pagans would be like, okay, so I'm still going to pray for you. I'm still going to treat you like a child of God. I'm still going to take care of your need if it's in my will to, if I have the ability to do it, I'm going to do it, right? But I'm not doing anything extra. So you're not going to come into my house. We're not going to be friends. We're not going to, da 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 da. But if I happen to see you out on the street and you're in trouble, I'm going to help you. But I'm not bringing you in my house to mingle with my family. So to me, that still says, to me, that's treat you like a pagan, treat you like a tax collector. It's like the popo. If I see a police officer hurt on the side of the road, I'm going to help him out. But I'm not bringing him to my house. I'm not going to cook him up. We're not doing that. Like, I'm still fulfilling I'm just being for real. I'm still fulfilling my Christian duty, right? But you still a popo, and you still out here murking Black people for no reason. So
I understand.
You feel me?
There's
I do. I feel you.
There's a quote. Lorraine, you'll know this, I think, by Darius Daniel, where he says, "Love and forgiveness does not mean access to re-injure."
Exactly, and I love that quote.
Yeah?
I love that quote. Let me tell you, I shouted when I heard it.
But you have to now, probably enforce different boundaries so that you don't, until you heal, until you become better. I'm not gonna let you, wander in and just re-injure me again, right?
Right, and it's the same thing that he said. He said the same thing.
Not that I have anything against you, to Tracy's point. It's like, we good, but
Right.
It's like God in the Garden of Eden, right? Like, we still good, but you can't get back in the garden though. You don't have the same kind of access that you did before. But we still good though. We reconcile. You can still talk to me.
I'm with everything that you guys are saying, but this chapter is not about that. That is in this chapter, but that's not what the chapter is about. And stay with me. If we were just doing an expose on forgiveness, we could extract stuff from this to make those statements, and y'all would be completely correct. So I'm not saying that anything you say is wrong. I'm saying that that's not the point Jesus is making. Jesus is making a whole different point.
I'm ready for a point.
All right, but I want to pull Kenrick in because I look like he's engaged here now. So I'm gonna pull him in.
No, I was. I mean, got people getting murked. Man,
I'm just, I'm putting the Bible in today's landscape. You know what I'm saying? Making it relatable for me. For me.
NLT, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I came in on the end of what Courtney was saying, and I guess the introduction as you come into the chapter really seems like God is trying to. Is that me giving feedback?
I don't know at this point.
I don't hear feedback.
All right.
I was hearing it before, but I don't hear it now.
It just seems like Jesus is trying to transform their thinking. Like there's something he's trying to teach them a different thing different way to process and bring them out of kind of the old thought into this new, for lack of a better term, philosophy, right, that he's introducing. And it includes all these different aspects, right? And he's using different aspects to kind of get the same point across, right? I'm trying to introduce you into this, for lack of a better term, kingdom mindset, right? And so I'm giving you all these different things that kind of components of it, right? It's all getting to one place, but these are the things that I need. Forgiveness is one of them, right? How you treat your brother is another one. How you do this is another one. Like I think he's walking them through, and I think that's where Courtney, if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of where he was going. But I just think it's he's just trying to teach him a different mindset and introduce him to like a kingdom
elevated way of thinking.
Kingdom understanding. Yeah.
I got it. So I like where you were going, Kenrick. It kind of segues into some things I would like to highlight, not yet about the point, but about good Bible study practice. So Bible writers are not unlike other writers. They are writing to an audience, and they're writing to an audience to make a point. And they're usually cogent in their points. And the things that they've put together and the way that they put them together is just like any other writer, right? And most times, except for like the Psalms, which is a collection of different writings. And so that that there's a collection of writings. But even in each chapter, the person who's writing the chapter is either writing for himself because it's private, or he's writing, like Paul, a letter to a group of people, or to his friend Timothy, or to his partner Philemon, or like there's an audience in mind, and that audience also has understanding around some of the things that are being said that we don't necessarily understand because we're so far removed. So it's careful for us to try and understand what they would understand first. What's the word to them? And then we can do the application to us. So that's thought number one. Secondly, they also leave clues in their writing oftentimes, and you see it a lot in the more in the New Testament, but even in the Old Testament, where they use these connecting words or these general ideas. And one of the things we start with in this chapter is the first verse. The first verse is the key to the whole chapter. What is the chapter about? It's verse 1. Matthew sets it up very clearly, like throws it up in the air and says, alley-oop. And then you go in for the dunk. What is this chapter about?
Who's greatest in the kingdom?
Yes. Everything that comes after is in response to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the answer to the question? Or according to, as Kenrick pointed out, what is the mindset Jesus wants them to now have based on that question?
Humble and forgiving.
You got to understand the kingdom.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Or maybe like understand his mindset.
Which is what? Because that's a good point, because I will go and say there are a couple of verses in here, 14, 6, 19, 35.
You saying a lot of numbers. I'm gonna need you to slow
Look, see
down.
those numbers are
Let me
numbers
get to the verse. Okay, so you said
I thought we were about to
you
play
said
some
6?
numbers. I wrote all them down to play them tonight.
I would say
You said 6?
6, 14, 19.
You said 6, 14.
Yes.
19, 35.
19, 35, and I would even say and 2 to 5. 2 to 5 sets it up, and everything else that comes after that, as Kerry points out, not variations of the same thing, as the same point being made with different illustrations.
Correct.
It makes the exact same point every time in each one of those sections. And I would say those verses I called out highlight the point. And Matthew includes them in there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see? If you were leveraging 614, 1935 as a point, what's the point that he's making?
So basically, if I'm going to say it the way that I understand it, the way that I understand it is in order for you to be able to have relationship with each other, basically you got to have a short memory. Like a kid.
That is a good tangential point, and that is a truism. So I must say, yes, that is true.
Okay.
Yes.
Salvation seems to be at the center of it. Like
Yeah.
There's an intent. There's an intent. There's an intent to save.
There's an intent to save, but how does that answer the question, who's the greatest in the kingdom? Because that's what he's doing. He's still answering that question. All of this is an answer to that question. So
the one that comes back? I don't know.
After you read all of this, what's the answer to the question? Who's the greatest in the kingdom?
I don't know.
That little kid.
I would say
the one in the middle.
I would say no one is the greatest.
See, okay, I was gonna say that, but then I was like, no.
Right? And if you read through the story, no one is the greatest. He values each of them equally.
Everything.
Even the ones that seem to be least important, like the little ones.
Right.
And he values them so fiercely that you shouldn't even let those go astray, because I am a fierce defender of those. I also defend of the ones who will go away. And I have systems in place to make sure that the collective, I value everybody so much that I'm giving you this system so that you can value the collective as well.
So basically God was looking at the disciple and he was like, hey, here's some free game. Okay.
And because they had this mindset of,
hierarchy, what's better.
Yes, hierarchy, but they're expecting this kingdom of God to be this, they're going to be on the inner circles and have this lordship positions. And so they're now trying to see, well, how can I get the greatest position? And as Kenrick is pointing out, or the point Kenrick is making, and Courtney to some degree as well, or in alignment with what Courtney is saying, he's saying, I need you to change this whole paradigm. This is a flat structure, and I care about everybody equally.
Right.
I care about everybody equally. And the people you think are least important, I am fiercest about. Them little children you would not think about.
But it overlooked.
Your society, they're not a big deal. You do something to them and watch what happens. Watch what happen to you if you lead one of them little ones astray. Right? Then he goes on, he gives the parable of the lost sheep. Everybody is so important that if one of them leave, I run in behind that one.
Going to get that one.
Yeah.
That's the position of my father. That's how my father values people. That's who's the greatest. The one who left to go out. And then he comes and he says about the forgiveness thing. What he's saying here is, and this was really powerful to me because I saw it in another light somewhere else. I am so about this community staying together that I'm putting this strategy to get together that allows the community to stay together, right? So if you and I are at fault, I need you to be as committed to the community, to the collective, to each other as I am, as my father is. I need you to be as committed as my father is to the lost one, because he has to stay in the community as he is to defending the child, because they are part of the community, right? To each other, because it's not about the sinner, it's about your brother, which means this person is in a community, right? Verse 15, he says, if your brother or sister, so they're believers, if they do wrong against you, here's the safety net to make sure community is preserved. Go and talk to him. And if he didn't want to hear you, call a few other people that you all respect and ask them to try and see if we can resolve this. And if they won't listen and they won't work to resolve it, bring the whole community in. Because, how hard you have to fight against being so opposed to being in community that you disregard the whole community and say, nah, me and him, nobody can change my mind. Me and him always be ugly. Now, if at that point, the whole community can't get you to reason, right? the whole community can't get you to reason to work this out, to preserve the community, we should put you out until you can come back and work to reconcile, or at least work it out. Maybe not have the same kind of access, but at least work it out. That's what the kicking out is, and the not dealing with this. And you can reread it again through those lenses. It's after the whole community comes and says,
Right.
I work this out, and this other person who's felt wrong says, nah, then you don't belong in this community, because we are a community of working it out. So that's where Peter then comes and says, well, how many times I should forgive somebody and go through this process? And Jesus is essentially saying infinity times. Look at what my Father does. Look at how committed my Father is to this process. This is the posture of my Father. And he says that in 6, how committed my Father is, verse 6. How committed my Father is, verse 14. How committed my Father is.
And don't forget the forgiveness you were shown to show it to other people.
Right.
In the last section. That guy quickly forgot.
Quickly forgot. Right? Because in the kingdom, we're a collective, we're a unit, we're one. Right? There is no greatest and least, and we're all the greatest. And we defend this community fiercely. And we do everything, we prioritize keeping the community together. And we do all that we can to keep everyone in. And if you get out, it's because you don't want to be a part. The people who he says treat like a tax collector and a pagan are the ones who won't even listen to the whole community. Everybody is saying, y'all work this thing out. And you say, nah. Well, then, yeah, at that point, you need to leave. Because you ain't trying to be about this community. You only about yourself.
But do we as churches really do this though?
No.
Like,
that was about to be my first question. I had
Do
two.
what?
That was one of them.
Do what?
Like,
I
really go
understand,
find the one? Do we value community so much that we even notice the one left? Much less.
No, I don't. Well, I guess I wouldn't. I don't know if you do it corporately. I was literally having this conversation with my mom, a couple, 3 or 4 days ago, and she called it. She called it a Matthew 18 conference. I was like, is that a formal term? Y'all almost got named like. But she said, she was like, I called a Matthew 18 conference. And I was like, and so,
okay.
I think people do it. I don't know if it's done corporately, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's done corporately.
I think that, but I know people that, I mean, there are people that actually.
I'm sure that there's people that do it, but from my own personal experience as of like today, and Lorraine and I have had several conversations about this, I don't think that that's something that's widely practiced, because I stopped going to my church before the pandemic. So the pandemic is 3 years. Before that, it was like another 2 or 3. And then I just wasn't there at all. And wasn't nobody looking for me. I'll just say it like that without, because I'm not here to spread negativity, but no one was looking for me. Like, no phone call. And I'm not someone at the time when I was active, wasn't someone, and again, Lorraine can attest to this, I'm not someone who just came to church and sat. I was somebody who was heavily involved. I mean, I don't think that there was anything at church outside of like cutting the grass or something that no, I'm being for real, that I haven't done.
So you do have a limit. I
do have a limit. I do. It's a high limit, but I do have a limit. I'm not cutting grass. No, I'm not. And I can't cut grass because I don't even know how to use a lawnmower.
Ain't no grass in New York. So
first of all, I'm not in New York, so you tried it. You tried it. I'm not in New York, and there is grass in New York, but I'm not in New York. Anyways, but I left, and nobody picked up the phone, and nobody knocked on my door, and nobody was wondering where I was. So I don't know if that's something that we like practice in real life.
So I'll ask you this question. These 2 questions. Well, I'll make one statement and then ask a question. what you describe is unique. The churches that I have been a part of, and even I hear my dad talk about it as well, about what his experience has been at his church that he served 40 years faithfully in, right? That's a common experience. If you're not there, you're not a part. You have to be there to be in the community.
Out of mind, out
of sight, out of mind. We have an out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be that way, though.
Yes, I agree. It's not supposed to be that way. My question is, how much do you think Western society, the influence of Western society, of culture, of individualism, me and mine, plays a part in undermining this?
Plays a huge part.
No.
Plays a huge part. Absolutely no. But the thing is, with you saying that, Western society does influence religion in this side of the world. However, the point of us taking the time to familiarize ourselves with these texts is so that we are creating a counterculture to what we are experiencing on an everyday basis.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't be the same thing.
Absolutely.
Next man up, dog.
It's just something to acknowledge that's a dynamic that we wrestle against. But I agree 100%. 100%. Yeah. So yeah. So Lauren,
so I don't know that we're practicing that. I think that's as to Lorraine's question and to my question. Is that something that we could do literally? I think for me, I believe to answer my own question, to a point, to bring someone else in or a couple other people in. But as far as like the entire community, I'm just gonna speak for me. I'm not doing all that.
Well, the hope is that it doesn't have to get to that, right? There's a safety net. It should be that we brother and sister enough that if I come to talk to you one-on-one and you hear people in the world say about it, we could talk as men. Like I see Breakfast Club all the time, and people always talking about beef, and everybody talking about as men we should be able to hash it out, or they should have called me and we should have talked directly. I mean, like the whole world suggests that at least step one is the step for when people have differences. We almost universally agree on that. This is like a safety net. If that fails,
then go to the next step and the next step and the next step, and then dust off your feet.
The world goes in.
It's not dust off your feet. What it does, and I'll say this, it's not even so much dust off your feet. You get to see how committed the other person is to the community and the relationship. Because if they don't want to hear from you, they don't want to hear from the small group. They don't want to hear from the big group in order to work it out, right? In order to bring back unity, harmony, resolution to the thing. If they're so opposed to that, then they're not built for community. And so they have now put themselves out.
On the outside.
Well, I think so going back, so the community point I think is really important in that, especially now you talk about Western society or Western civilization, like the whole next man up, like it's very much, I mean, our churches have taken on like a corporate culture, right? To where, you attend a church, but like you have responsibilities when you attend that church. And if you're not fulfilling that responsibility, like if you're not there to fulfill it, like they got to get somebody else in, you're a cog, right?
And you don't get no benefits when you're not being a cog either. I can say that right now.
No, but
one of the things,
but it's constant, but it's like, and I'm saying this, so the more time I spend outside of this country, and Spain is still considered like Western civilization, but it's a completely different mindset in how people go about what they do and putting the what emphasis they put on the syllable, right? It's very much more about family, friends, relationships, less about fulfilling whatever that particular responsibility was. Like it's much more about, I mean, people hang out more, right? You go to work in the morning, you take a break, you walk the streets, and people out, they'll drink beer at 10, they'll have coffee, they'll have their lattes at 10.
We want you to
then
work
you go
until
back,
the wheels fall off.
And then 2 o'clock, at 12 o'clock, there's siesta till 3, and people are back out, hanging out with each other, doing all these type of things, and they go back to work. And then, you don't start eating dinner until 8, and don't be expected to be done with dinner till he left. Like, it's because you're hanging out in this community, you're just doing everything. It's all about relationships, and so it's do people work? Yes. Are people productive? Yeah. Right. But there's something that's bigger that
more
people
important
are accomplishing. That's family's big. Family's important, and friends are important, and so when you look at that and contrast to that kind of what we do, not just in corporate culture and kind of what we do for work and society, but what our churches have become here, it doesn't resemble it doesn't create space for that, and so there is no relationship. So you're not going to get a call. Right? Or if there's a problem, no one's going to pull you aside because they don't know you. There's no relationship
So
there.
essentially what
True
you're saying,
relationship.
what we all know is like, back to what you said earlier about, this being a country or a society that's very individualistic. Our churches are just mirroring our culture when we shouldn't be.
I would say yes. I would then say and. One thing I have learned is that the medium is the message. And so when your church's structures are built around performance and stage, what you end up with is spectacles. We're all Beyonce fans, but we don't know
and numbers.
And while we're there in the concert and we know the songs, but when we leave that concert,
no. Every man.
But there was no relationship that was built.
Exactly, because the form doesn't facilitate relationship.
Correct.
When we at Beyonce's concert,
you ever been to a Beyonce concert?
We're what, part of the Beehive?
You ever been to a Beyonce concert? Because if you've been to a Beyonce concert, you got some coins.
I'm using her illustratively because she just had 2 concerts here in DC recently.
I'm teasing, Jared. I'm teasing.
But you understand the point of we have affinities, something that we share, that we like, that we do together, but we're really doing it by ourselves in a big space. Right? We all joining together in the same space for something that we mutually like. But the format does not create the dynamic for developed relationships.
I agree.
Another thing.
That's why date nights movies as date nights that never made sense to me.
Yeah, because we're not talking to one another. We sit down next to one another, but we're not interacting.
Wait, explain that to me. What do you mean date nights and movie nights don't make sense?
So if the primary activity for
well, just date, go on a date. Have you ever been on a date to a movie?
Yeah. So if the primary, and he's talking about primary activity, not included.
Okay.
You can cop feels. No, you go to movies and cop feels. You do all that, but nah, it ain't talking about that. I'm talking about like.
But you don't get to learn anything about
different kind of connection, Kendrick. Different.
Yeah.
You want to do a date thing where you get to interact with the other person,
right? Oh, well,
like a lot of
no, I've never done that because I always recognize that I can't talk to you when I go to the movie, so I've never done that to answer your question. No.
But that's kind of what Jared's saying.
The way that we do church continues to feed it even more.
Gotcha.
And the way we market church. Come here for your kids. Come here for this word. Come here, this guy speak. We have this bomb praise team. Those are the appeals to come to your church. So I go, and it's almost like consumer shopping, right? Mm-hmm. I go to the church that best suits my likes and my preferences. That's why I go to this church and not that church. That's why I will drive past 4 churches in my area to go to the church down the street because I'm going there for what pleases me. And when they stop pleasing me, I just look for another church and I go to it. But the churches are feeding it, right? The churches are feeding because that's how they're marketing. That's how they're trying to draw people. And that's how they design their setup. So like all of these forces are at play, and that's all I'm pointing out. Sorry.
Yeah. No. It's just, and I think it's, it's when you spend how many hours in a week? 160, 70? I don't know. There's a bunch of hours in a week, right? And of those hours in the week, your work and society dominates so much of that time. And that's where you get most of your learning, your habits, all this kind of, school teaches you this and work teaches you this and all these different things. And so it's just easier to take those things, those modes of operation, and put into this particular thing that you're only there for 3-4 hours a week.
And then, to be fair, we're not going to church for community either. We go in for the word. We go in because we need a prayer. We go in for the music. We go in.
That's not
you know,
true.
to dress up. I mean, when you think about why people go to church, right? You may have a handful of people who go for community, right? But most of us are going for selfish reasons.
Gotta get this word, dog. Had a rough week.
There's something I do. I'm going there for my benefit.
Yeah.
I'm not going there as part of, the group. Now there are people who do that. So I'm not saying it's everybody, but most of us. And we said it last week or last time we were here. Prayer meeting is the same thing.
So there was like
Prayers about
there
me.
was a
me
there
and
was
mine.
a there was a time where I think it was around the time I met Trisha, where like church was all day for us, right?
All day.
So
The entire
literally,
day.
the entire
Bring a
day.
change of
So
clothes.
we,
'cause
look,
the
we
titanium
would go,
right
you come
here
in with clothes and bags
Look.
because you knew it was gonna be a day thing.
the whole
So we
day.
used to go. We would go to church for Sabbath school. I love Sabbath school. That was my favorite
Me
part.
too.
Of church. So I go to church for Sabbath school. Sermon. I also, additionally, a plus for me, I do go to church for the sermons. I do.
Nothing's wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with that.
So I prefer the pastors that teach more than preach, if you get what I'm saying. And so we would go to church throughout the day, and then we'd leave church, go to have lunch at whoever's house it is but it tended to be the usual group, but then we would have our own invite that we would invite, and we would bring different people along with us. Like, hey, we're going.
Just hang out with your click.
Mhm.
That's all y'all just did.
No, we always met. There was a neutral amount that always met, just like water for the thirsty. We always welcome people to come, but there's still a usual amount that's usually present, right?
Yeah.
And so we would always get together and we would talk about the sermons, and sometimes there'd be like some serious debates of what the pastor talked about, and we're reflecting, and just like how we're doing here. And then we'd have lunch and literally lay there. We would have a lot of theology majors in the place, and they'll be preaching and talking about different things. And it'll be all day till like it's nighttime. Now it's like, okay, now what we about to do? It's nighttime. Where else are we about to go?
Sometimes we break out until game night.
Right. And so I have missed, since that time, I have not experienced anything like that ever since that point.
But that's the thing, and I think that's what, when you talk about community and whatnot, that's kind of where we when we were running youth, we would do it the same way. Like we go on trips, you try to keep the formal activities to a minimum, right? Because relationships are built on the bus. Relationships are built when you're eating, all these different things, right? That's when communities really truly generated. Is to your point. It's not during the sermon. It's not just. It's the off times when everybody's kind of hanging out, chilling, relaxing, maxing, relaxing.
Shooting some people outside of school.
Yeah. So
they're up to no good.
But it happens then, right? And that's when communities formed. And so if you're not in those spaces, right, to form that community, if you're always programming, if you're always trying to do something to keep someone's attention, then you never give your opportunity to let your hair down, not me, and just kind of just hang out, chill, talk, form community.
I have a question, since we're talking about community, because it's in my brain, and I'm just going to throw it out there. I guess I'm allowing myself to play devil's advocate. Like, what does that community look like when you're going through different seasons of life, right? So what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. This one, I'm on a platform where 4 out of the 6 people that are here are married people, right? And so, like, for me, that's like my everyday lived experience. You had to count. You had to make sure that I said it right.
Yes. Yeah. I was just.
I thought you're not married. Courtney's
Yeah,
not married.
don't
Jerry's
stress,
not
don't
married.
even. Yeah,
Jerome's not
no,
married.
No, you're
all
right.
the men,
Listen,
all the men are married.
Yes, you're right. You're right. I'm a
So
counter.
it's just to me, this platform is just an example of what my everyday lived experience is, which is I don't really look for community anymore because to me, from my purview, it's not available to me. Not without, its own like rules and regulations and icky
Nuances
sticky
and
and
yeah.
it's just easier to just be like, you know what,
So,
when church is over, I'm gonna just go ahead and head to the
so
house.
that's a good
I'll
point,
see y'all
Trisha,
later.
and
Because I don't need no problems. I don't need any problems.
it's a good point, and it's one of
So
the
what does community
unfortunate.
look like for the rest of us who are not like that?
So no, what you will discover is that whenever you put two or more people together to do life, you always get those situations. Ask any one of these married people who have a spouse. You're going to have, when you have more than two people in a circumstance, I don't care whether it's at work, whether it's girlfriends, whether it's partners who just play basketball. Once you have more than two people, community gets icky sticky.
But community
Yeah,
and
but
community
see,
isn't. But community isn't. Community isn't having like-mindedness. I mean, even
Right.
when you
no,
talk.
I'm not talking about like-mindedness, but for me, what I'm saying is let me just, I'm trying to be I'm
After
trying to
9
be
What?
nice about it, but like, okay, let me just, I'm gonna
It's
try.
after 9
Lord,
o'clock.
help
Go
me.
ahead.
You're from New
Okay,
York.
so
You have a nice.
it is very difficult
Don't know the rules yet. That's
for
okay.
some
Go.
of us. I'm Lorraine. See, I'm trying. I told you I would try.
Go.
Because she knows I would just say it how I feel it, and I can't do that right now. But I will
It's
say
after
that it's
9, you
very
can.
challenging for myself and people that are in the same situations, like
What's that?
Lorraine, single. You want me to say
Oh,
single?
okay. All
To
right.
be
Just
able to have community with everyone else because it can be challenging, whether it is something that somebody else may ensue, which I've personally been a part of, or somebody, may say something the wrong way or catch suggestion or whatever, it becomes very uncomfortable for me. And then I just don't want to be a part. You know what I'm saying? So let me give you an example. So I
Oh,
lost
you
a
pissed somebody's
friend.
wife off.
Yeah, no. I pissed off the friend of somebody's. I pissed off the friend of a wife.
Ah,
I'll
yeah.
give
That
you the
happens.
synopsis. So we were all together in a group, and at that point in time, I was like in my mid-20s, and I got into a bad car wreck. I had just got my first vehicle, and I got into a bad car wreck on the way to a holiday gathering of all these people.
A connection session.
Right, exactly. And so I got into a really bad accident. Long story short, two of the husbands, let's say like you guys were in the group, two of the husbands decided that they were going to help me look for a vehicle because I was brand new. I didn't know what I was doing, whatever. So within the span of like 3 or 4 days, they had come to my house and picked me up, and we go look for this car, look for that car, whatever. Didn't really get settled down onto it. That came down to another holiday. So I got into the car accident Christmas. We ended up spending New Year's together in between those days looking for a car. Long story short, we played a game night. As God is my witness, we played a game night. And the friend of the wife, went back and told the wife that she didn't like how cozy we were being during a whole group game. Like, we're not in a separate room. Like, the table is in the middle of the room, and everybody's gaming and having a good time. And she, the friend, felt some kind of way and took it to the wife, and then it became a problem.
Yeah, sounds about right. And
So
that's what I
they're the
was
type
saying.
of things that I'm not trying to be a part of when we're talking about like building community, because it's more, for me, I believe it's a little bit more complicated.
I'd be more strategic.
But you just walk through this whole
Right, you know what I'm
thing.
saying? I gotta like
But-
play like tic-tac-toe when I
But
come in the door, and I
Trisha,
just don't have to do that.
it don't matter where you go, you're going to experience that once you have people. And it's not going to be the same situations, but you're going to experience the same
No.
discomfort. And that's why Jesus is saying it here, because it just happens. And it happens when it's just two people.
Bro,
husband
I
and a
already
wife.
don't people well. This is too much.
No, it's part of it.
70 times
Just
7.
tell them the truth.
That's why the command is 70 times 7, because, and why he's so fierce about the whole keeping the community together, because it happens.
Well,
That's
y'all
why
gonna have to
forgive-
pray for me.
And,
'Cause
and then he
why
required
forgiveness is a piece, and the process for dealing with issues when they arrive is what makes
The offenses will
successful
happen.
community.
well, you know what? I will say in my not even want to say defense. I did bring it to her though. I brought it to the person who said it. I brought it to the wife, and I brought it to another friend
yeah,
who
the
eventually
process
got the
is-
whole. All three. But I did it at different times. But eventually, for me, I was given an apology. I will say that. I don't want it to seem like, they just. I was given an apology.
Then it worked.
But
That's community.
that was the last time they saw my face.
and that's unfortunate.
That's on you.
That's unfortunate. But here's what I'm saying to you.
That
Community has that. Successful community is not the absence of conflict, but having
yeah, but I don't
good,
need that kind of
having good
conflict. I don't need the
strategies
conflict
for
that's
dealing
gonna
with it.
make you. And
Right, so I
understand that,
guess-
Jerry, but
I
will
guess
challenge
the
you by
point
saying for
is-
me.
Go
ahead,
ahead,
but
Lorraine.
here's a question I have.
Offenses are gonna happen when you have people together. Offenses are gonna happen intentionally or unintentionally, right?
Correct.
And
Right,
so
but that
when
was
those
intentional.
offenses happen, he teaches you how to approach it because it's bound to happen. Period.
Correct.
So I get what you're saying.
Correct.
I mean,
Is it
I get that it's
directed-
bound to happen. I'm not oblivious to the fact that conflict is going to arise when you put a diverse group of people together. Like, I get it, but I feel for my look.
Diverse,
like
any
this.
group. Me and my wife have conflict. Like we have conflict, and we're not even diverse.
Right, I get that, but this is
mean,
conflict
I'm
for
a
me. I
woman.
feel like
I mean,
this is
she's a
conflict
woman, I'm
that
a
I can
man.
avoid because had
No.
she taken that information right and gone someplace else with it, she would have done a lot of damage. Not
Yeah,
just
that's
it
to
just
the
happened. It just
That's-
Yeah, but again,
That's
that's
my point.
No, that's not something that you can brush off. I'm sorry.
No,
It's
not,
It's-
that's not what we say. Not saying we brush off. Say manage your expectations. That is normal.
She can expect me to be at my house from now on. She can expect that.
right, but then that's that. Look.
That's the thing.
If you're at work, that's gonna happen. If you're in school, that's gonna happen. If you're
But I'm
hanging around
getting paid
friends,
for
if
that,
you make
though.
more money than them, it'll happen. If you make less money than them, if you keep letting the fact that those things crap is gonna happen, the choice you make is: are you going to be reduced by the crap or not? Are you
No, I'm not going to be reduced at all. I'm just saying. I guess what
Well,
I'm saying
it
is.
sounds like. Well,
No,
I mean,
no,
if you have an opportunity to be in community and you're not choosing to be
No, I'm
because of
saying
how
that
things went or could
I'm
have gone.
asking what does no, I don't think that that's fair. I'm asking what does community look like for some of us individually, right? And then I'm saying to you that I'm not closing myself off from community. I did close myself off from that group specifically, but I feel like I also have a right to protect myself.
So we're not in disagreement with the right to protect yourself. What I'm saying is, no matter what group you go into, you're going
There's
to
gonna be
experience
problems.
some kind of
I get that.
dynamic, right? And so, what makes a successful community is not the type of conflict, but the strategies for dealing with it when
Dealing
it
with
arrives.
conflict, right?
So what does community look like? It looks exactly like what you just described. That's
And I think
exactly
that's why also the expectation is that we all have that same mindset, that same
Right.
approach to reconciling. So if I do something, you can come to me. If you do something, I will come to you because I value you and you value me.
In theory, but even if you don't have that value system, the community itself create like what that chapter, one of the things it illustrates is how you go about dealing with someone who may not even have that value system
Right.
that's
Yeah.
within your community.
Well, right.
Yeah.
There's a structure there that allows you to even communicate with them in a way to where you can bring them on and to reintroduce the value set. I mean,
I guess
It's
what I
part
should
of the
say is that
process.
I'm not trying to. I guess it sounds renounce community, and I'm not. I'm just saying, community can be a little prickly sometimes.
Yeah,
Just have to be more strategic.
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
what we're saying. Are we agreeing with you? And we're
Okay.
saying that is true, and it is true of every community, everywhere, all the time. And it doesn't matter whether it's a church community, whether it's a social club, and that's why we like Real Housewives of America, because that's what community is.
Hold out. Okay.
That's because that's what
It is.
And what Jesus, the game that Jesus is peeping is how to deal with that.
How to deal with
when
that.
it comes.
Okay.
Because it's coming. And it gets
And
messy. Like if we go to Acts chapter 5, right? After the people was going house to house in chapter 2, and they was talking about how great it was, now it come time to share food. And the Hellenistic Jews vex because they're getting served last instead of the Jewish Christians. And it created a bacchanal. And they had to figure out how to navigate that. Right there in the midst of utopia, they just had the big the spirit come down and the tongues, and they had a baptism, 3,000 people coming all at one time, and they was in house to house every day. They was praying and breaking bread together, and then the reality of community come, the dynamics of the people and their cultural influences start to show up in something simple as sharing food.
Jared, you remember too, they started to complain about who was washing hands and how they were washing hands and what it's like, oh man. I'm a firm believer in the fact that there's no such thing as the absence of problems, only the exchange of them.
Yeah.
So you might leave, one community with one type of problem, and then in that group you might have been the most broke in that group. You go to another group, now you're the one with the most money, and it's a whole different.
So it's basically out of the frying pan into the fire scenario.
Yeah, wherever you have people, you're gonna have
Everywhere people, man. Always
everywhere
conflict.
you have people, you're gonna have prickly. And people think it's easier with just one person, right? So you just get married and it's just me and this one person who I vetted thoroughly. And then everybody who is married will tell you that is probably worse than the big group. Because
Well, at least 50.
in the big group you can hide. In the big group you can avoid people from day to day, and I could deal with you for a little bit and you for a little bit. But this one person is just the two of all there.
Yep.
Right.
Oh my
50% of those people think that.
50%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go with that number.
Yeah.
But my point is, even with people who love one another, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's always conflict. Never gonna get away from it.
yeah.
So
And
I guess my question is what is the overall idea that is tying this entire chapter together?
The overall idea is verse 1. The overall idea is verse 1. There is no greatest. The greatest is
There's
the
no
least.
greater.
Okay.
The greatest is the least. We're all God is as passionate about the little one as he is about the other one. And we should be just as passionate.
Okay.
Because I think the minute we start thinking more of ourselves or too highly of ourselves, that's when trouble starts, right?
Yeah.
Facts.
Yeah. We should work as diligently for the good of everyone, the good of the whole, as God does. That's the point. Because there
I
is
just wanted to
no
make sure I got it so I can write it down.
Jared, thank you for bringing that together, because at first I was like, what? Where is he going with this?
Yeah, man.
No, that's word.
All right, Lauren, that was one. Did you get the answer to your question? Oh, we still haven't done tax collector and pagan. So to be fair, and just wrap that up with a nice little bow, the tax collectors and the pagans in the Jewish community were outside. They were cast out. People didn't used to deal with them and talk to them. And you saw it a little bit if you've watched Chosen, how they treated Matthew before they brought him in.
Yeah.
Like Matthew, people didn't talk to him, and Jesus was giving them license to deal with people like that because they're putting themselves on the outside.
Got it.
Okay, because I was like, that's kind of weird. Okay.
They are putting themselves on the outside because they don't want to be a part of the community, and
They're choosing
to be a part of the community's wishes. So if you can't hear from the whole community and look to reconcile, because that's what it is. They're refusing to reconcile, even with the whole community beseeching. You are putting yourself out of the community. And so
And
we
what
will
verse
treat
is
you
that,
like that.
Jared?
Huh?
What verse
was
is that?
verse
The
17.
17.
17?
Yeah, it was 17.
Okay.
And if they refuse to listen to the church, then you treat them like that. Because what they're actually doing is saying, F all. I have nothing to do with that girl, and don't make her talk to me at all. And we can't have that in the community. Right? We
Jesus.
can't have that. Because if I start allowing you not to talk to her and start having it, then when Courtney started to have problems with Jerry, now I had to give them a blight too. And we can't have that. Right? We had to work it out so we could come back and do the thing. Right? And if you don't want to work it out, then you can't be here. Till you're ready.
It's like that that verse where it talks about a house divided against itself.
Yeah.
Can't stand.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's also in you're choosing not to be a part of the community. Like you've it's not the community that's kicking you out. You've distanced yourself from the community.
Which I think is a pretty cool idea, because so many times I've heard like people say, just in general, like they don't want to choose, like, you know, serving God, Jesus, Spirit, whatever you decide to call your higher power. And it's like they feel like because they're not given a choice. And I feel like, to me, there's like so many examples of choice. And even this is honoring your choice, like your choice to not be a part of the community. Like, I'm going out of my way to make sure that I can, like we said earlier, reconcile. And you are making a different decision. And because of that, I got to respect your decision.
Respect your, I'm joking. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's essentially what it is. We're respecting your decision not to be a part of the community.
Okay.
But the door is always open if you change your mind.
If you change your mind.
Is it though? I'm joking.
You know that, Jared, that we use
Lauren, you said isn't
the wrong things.
no?
Isn't it funny that we use that approach for all the wrong things? So instead of letting people put themselves out and we leave the door open, it's kind of like, well, you know, we don't like how this person dressed, or this person got pregnant, or the marriage, or whatever the case is, and then
Ooh, wait a minute.
Absolutely. Because we didn't read verse 1.
mm-hmm.
And that's why I went through the process, because that's a key idea in Bible study, is understanding the context. What was the question that was asked that prompted this response? And is all of this a part of the response? And if it is, how is it responding to that? And figuring that out helps us then figure out, how do I make this make sense in my life then? Right? Because it's not disjoint ideas. They're not proverbs that sit apart from one another, you know, self-contained ideas. In this, it was not a self-contained idea. It was a cogent thought with illustrations that make up the same thought. So yeah.
But to Jared, so, and I said, like, is it though, as a joke, but I'm being serious.
No, you weren't joking. You
right, I'm being serious, because sometimes when people, let's say the collective comes together to address the person, and they're like, no, I'm not doing it, and they choose to be outside.
The person does.
Yeah. So we said they get to choose, right? We're respecting their decision. But sometimes, let's say time has passed and that person tries to come back, what usually happens is, oh no, you said you wanted to be out there.
Now these people are in the wrong.
We salty. We on the inside. We salty now.
But who does that one bring with him when all the collective you wanted to be out there, like, be out there. I'm joking. Everybody won't be on the same page with that, but
you're right. Everybody won't be on the same page with it. But
I do see that happen though. I've seen that happen. It's like, oh no, you said you wanted to be out, so keep that same energy. Like, stay out.
Keep that same energy. And we live in that. Keep that.
I do that to my kids all the time.
Type of time too. So yeah.
What, Kendrick?
I did that to Addison or Layla. Was it Layla this past week? It's like, yo, all right, you said you wanted, like, this all. Stay outside.
He said, I'm about that energy.
Stay outside.
He said, I'm one of the same ones. Keep like Jared's like, I don't know.
These people. I don't know.
No, that's not way. I love him still. And I guess that's why one of the main points that Jesus makes by telling the story of the lost sheep, right, is to show the commitment of the Father to the flock, and saying that that's the kind of commitment that we should have to the community.
Well, I will say this, and this is just me being honest about where I am. I think for me, I have to. How's the best way to say this? I have to de-racialize my brain when it comes to
De-racialize your brain?
Yes, when it comes to the Bible and community and things like that, because I'll explain what I mean, because I know it sounds kind of crazy or maybe even ludicrous, but like it's easier for me to see, like, okay, I'll say it like this. I was at work today and I had a client, she's about 80 years old, and I'm working with her and, helping her to like organize some stuff and some things in her home or whatever. And then she has a caregiver who comes in and helps her and her husband, because my client is the full-time caregiver for her spouse. And then she has a caregiver that comes in and helps him out during the week. But the caregiver is just as old as she is, even though they're the same age, they don't move physically the same way. The one who's coming in is actually a lot older and a lot needier than the person who's actually getting the help. Anyway, long story short, I found myself today, and I'm just being honest, I found myself today, even after waking up in the morning and reading, like, no lie, like 3 or 4 chapters and being like super enlightened, I found myself being rebuked in the middle of the way I was treating this lady, because I just didn't like her. Like, I just didn't. She was annoying. She was getting on my nerves. I just didn't want to fool with her. And for no reason than she was just old and white. Swear to God. And in the middle of me like trying to like ignore this lady, I was like, some verses that I had read came back to my mind, and I had to internally check myself, because I didn't want to be nice to her, simply on account of that she's not the same race as me. And so,
well, you said old and white.
Well, I don't have a problem with her being old.
It was age and color.
Ageism.
Well, no, I don't have a problem with the age, because I deal with old people all the time.
She said
Like,
she was old and white.
But she had the in my eyes, she had the misfortune of also being white as well.
Yeah,
so I just wasn't trying to fool with her.
Understood.
But anyway, I was rebuked internally by my attitude towards this lady.
Very good.
And I had to turn it around. I did. And it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I had to remember what I read, and that what I read isn't just for me and doesn't just apply to me and the people that I like or want to be around. It also applies to the people I don't like or the people I don't want to be around. And that was probably, I'm not gonna lie, that was really hard for me, because I'm like,
and that's probably that's more of a sign of it, because that's one of the things that God, Jesus talks about, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to
like
be
applying,
with the
right with your friends,
with the old black lady.
Yeah,
because she looked like my mother, right? The old black lady looks like my mother.
Or based on what you said, young and black. Let's just go with the opposites. If she was young and black, it'd be easy, right?
No.
If she was
Probably not.
She's just honestly, she's just white, and I just generally don't go out of my way to interact with people that are white. I just don't.
I hear you.
For various reasons, but especially women. For me, especially women, I just do not go out of my way to deal with them. I just
so
don't.
What was the what was the? I mean,
what was
you were pricked. The Holy
was.
Spirit, you're pricked, like you're going through that process. Where did you land on it?
I landed on treating her the same way that I was treating my client. Treating her, because when I see my client, I see my grandmothers, I see my mother, but when I looked at her, I didn't see that, right? I just didn't have that connection to her. And so when I got pricked, like you said, I was like, dang, you just like literally, I don't know about anybody else, but like my inner voice sometimes is just, she's ratchet, but that's what I need.
No.
So she was just like, you just gonna be out here talking to this lady crazy just because she white. That's what we doing today? After you just woke up in the morning and read like 3 chapters and read something completely different. That's what we doing today. We just gonna treat her like we don't even see her. And I had to answer. Like I'm being so 1000% right now. That's what happened in my head. That's literally what happened. I was sitting on the couch with my phone out, actively ignoring this lady, and I was my insides was really like, really, Trish? Really, this is what we're doing? So you gonna lay in your bed and be all enlightened and reading all these chapters and then come out here and act like this? And what I did, I put my phone down and I looked up to her and I began, because I realized that she was trying to engage me in conversation and I just wasn't having it. And I was using my phone as a deterrent to connect with her. And so eventually I put my phone on pause because I was watching a YouTube video waiting for my client. I put the phone down and I looked up and looked at her eye to eye and actually engaged her. But I felt some type of way and I had to correct it. And so for me, I'm like, there is places and spaces where I believe, I'm just admitting openly that applying these types of principles is hard.
It's very hard.
Yeah, and you're in Alabama.
Boy.
Absolutely. I would like to affirm you for yielding to the prick.
Man, I didn't want to either. If you could just picture a 2-year-old just getting upset, like, man, I didn't want to. Like, I did not want to, but I had to. I had to be obedient, but I did not want to. Oh, I did not want to.
That's a t-shirt, Jerry. Yield to the prick.
Yes.
I did. I yielded. I did, Jared. I yielded. I did.
Definitely make that a shirt.
It's gotta be context. They don't know if that's the person.
Yeah.
The other ones don't have context.
Just put that scripture text. What is it where was it Saul who became Paul on the road to Damascus and God tells him it's hard for you to kick against the pricks, right? So just leave the little scripture below it.
Somebody said in the comments the prick can be taken 2 ways. I'm done. Oh my God. Yes, but I did yield to what I believe. I did yield to what I believe is the speaking of the Holy Spirit, right? And yes, my Holy Spirit speaks to me in a ratchet voice. Do with that what you may, but she does. And I listen. So that's what happened. And so for me, this is it's doing what it needs to do, but it's not easy. It's not easy.
Absolutely, it's not. And it's not easy not to eat the cake when it's sitting on the couch on the counter.
Man,
not easy. So yeah, Lauren, did we get your question answered? The first one.
Absolutely.
All right, number 2.
Really? Really? You sure?
Yeah, let's try one. Let's try one.
I don't know which ones will be shorter. Maybe Hebrews might be shorter. I don't know.
Let's go with that one.
Oh, Lord, here we go.
I don't know. It was the one where I was going to ask if there are different kinds of priests.
No. Yeah, that's a short one. Let's do that.
Okay. Because I was like, I feel like that should be short.
Is this the Melchizedek?
Yeah.
I have a question about Melchizedek too. So yes, I'm glad you opened that up because I wrote that down this morning.
All right. So the question is, are there different types of priests? Depends on what the context of that question is. In the Bible?
Well, yeah, because it sounded like it said the priest of Melchizedek or something like that.
Quick little.
Yeah, I need some clarification on Melchizedek because I've had a couple people ask me this, and I've never heard a sermon on Melchizedek. Nobody preaches that.
Let's go with Lauren's question first, and then we'll come to these other questions on the side. So Lauren's question.
Because I had researched the order of Melchizedek because I kept seeing it over and over again when it comes to the priests in the verses.
Right. So let's answer Lauren's question first, and then we'll come back to the other 2. Yes, there are different types of priests, and in the Bible, there's several different types of priests. So but let's start with what a priest is. All right. A priest in the Bible, or a priest generally, including in the Bible, is a person who teaches the instructs the people in the will of a God. Right? So that's general. However, within the Jewish community, which is what the Bible is rooted in, they had regular priests and then a high priest who was over all the priests. Right? So you had, yeah, and so that was essentially the setup: high priest and then priests. Melchizedek was neither one of those because he wasn't Jewish. Right? He was a priest of a whole nother town, a whole nother culture, a whole nother.
Okay.
Right? He was featured very briefly in a story with Abraham. Abraham went to rescue some people and fought alongside Melchizedek. And when they rationed off the loot from the endeavor, he gave Melchizedek a tenth of the thing out of respect.
Yeah.
Melchizedek happened to be God's representative in terms of teaching the people the way of the God, and he also happened to be the king of the people. So he was king of Salem and priest of Salem. And it was a very quick reference. It was a very quick reference in Genesis to Melchizedek in that context. They mentioned him that he was a prince of Salem, which means peace. So he's a prince of peace, or the king of peace. He was a priest of peace. Salem? Yes, I think it's Salem.
It's Salem.
Yeah.
But he's the king of Salem. He's a priest of Salem, and Abraham honored him after they fought together. Right? They fought together, and Abraham showed him respect. That was the end of the reference of Melchizedek. The writer of Hebrews is writing to people who know that story, and is trying to make a point about the significance of Jesus. Jesus is, and what they understand about Jesus is that he is now king, because Jesus says that's the Messiah is a king. He's a political figure of sorts who is in charge and has authority over everybody, much like a king does. But he is trying to show them that for all the stuff that they know about the temple and the priests and the whatnot, that Jesus is a priest in an order more like Melchizedek than a regular high priest, because he's a priest
and a king.
And that he didn't come from
right.
He wasn't a Levite.
Correct. He didn't come from the order, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because that was another thing. Most times in the Bible, they describe who was the father of somebody, and Melchizedek was just introduced with no background. Now, it could be that the author just didn't leave it out, but whoever's writing Hebrews leverages this fact about what is said about Melchizedek to bolster his point about Jesus.
The writer of Hebrews, whoever this Bama is, just the words that were used to describe Melchizedek doesn't help, because it's like he is Melchizedek. He has no end and no beginning. He has no all this kind of stuff, right? That creates. So the questions I get are always like, so is there more than one? He has no end. It's like, dude, it's like you didn't help the situation. The story. Why would you make this so convoluted to the point where it's like I can't even answer the question, because when he puts in there he has no he has no beginning, he has no end, all this kind of stuff, it makes it look like there is another.
Right. So, and this is why it's important to follow the whole cogent thought all the way through.
Correct.
Right? So that you can, because when you just focus in on single, and this is not you, Kenrick, this is when you, one of us, people who read the Bible, don't follow the thought. We put emphasis on things that may be interesting, but not part of the story, right? And I like to use Walking Dead and using the toilet. They don't often, unless it's a part of the story, you'd never really see anybody using the toilet, and you don't see how the ladies in this post-apocalyptic world deal with having their periods. You don't see it. So the fact that it doesn't see it, does it happen? I don't know, but it's not part of the story. So why are we spending time thinking about that, right? That's not the story they're telling. And if it was, then they would include it, right? And so writers in the Bible are doing the same thing, and we have to be able to pass that. And we pass that by following the thought.
But the fact that he mentions it, though.
Yes, but you have to keep in context what he's mentioning and why he's mentioning it, right? He's
So is he drawing a parallel between Jesus and Melchizedek?
yes,
as
but,
a priest?
but to make a point. And yes, he is doing that, but the
Okay.
point is what is why Melchizedek is chosen. So what he does, and this is where you have to go back to verse 1. He's writing to Hebrews to tell them about the importance of Jesus, right? And the significance of Jesus. And he's leveraging things that they already know to make the point. So he starts off by saying he's God's son, chapter 1. I follow the thought. He introduces Jesus as God's son. And then he uses all these scripture to show not only is he God's son, but he's higher than the angels, right? And then he leverages that to make a little, application to life. Then he goes on and says Jesus was also fully human, right? So while he was God's son and he was higher than the angels, he was also human like you and me. Right? And like literally, this is a simple case that he's making. Then he goes on and say, but he was greater than Moses. You all hold Moses in high esteem. Jesus was even greater, and he makes that point.
Yeah, he does.
Then he goes on to make a point about the Sabbath rest for God's people, right? In tying into Moses, because in what all that Moses did for the people, Moses didn't bring them into rest, but Jesus is carrying them into this rest. That's what makes him greater than Moses. The next point that he makes is he's the great high priest. You know that high priest that you're thinking, you hold that person in high regard. Jesus is greater than that. In fact, he's so great, he's a priest in the order of Melchizedek. So then he talks about the things about Melchizedek that make Jesus greater than the high priest and makes Jesus a priest in the order of Melchizedek.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, no.
And then he talks about Jesus, because he's that kind of high priest, he can now carry out this new covenant that does away with the old one. And so it's a bridge transition into this idea of the work that Jesus came to do and why he could do it, because he's not just the Messiah, the king, but he's also a priest. And because he's in that kind of order, he's not Melchizedek, he's a priest in the order of Melchizedek, is what he says in the end of 6 and then goes into 7. And then he recaps who Melchizedek was, right? And he says, this Melchizedek was king of Salem and high priest of the God Most High. He met Abraham returning, the 7 verse 1. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of kings and blessed him. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. First of all, Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Then also king of Salem means king of peace. So that's a statement of the kind of priest that Jesus is. Jesus is the king of righteousness and the king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days, ends of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Right? And so that's because priests serve for a term, they die, somebody else comes and takes their place. He's saying, nah, nobody's coming to take this guy's place. In the same way that
Jared
was. Yes.
Can you tell me, you said earlier who he was writing to, or the group of people specifically? You said he was writing to the Jews or the Hebrews?
Hebrews or Jews. I mean, the Hebrews were Jews. So the Jews are a subset of the Hebrews.
Okay.
Because the Hebrews could be the Reubenites, the Hebrews could be the Danites, the Hebrews could be all the descendants of Abraham are Hebrews. The Jews are Judah and Benjamin, the southern kingdom, and the descendants of those.
Who was the person writing this letter?
We don't know. In the old days, they believed it to be Paul, but modern scholarship say it's unlikely that it was Paul, but we don't know who the author of the Hebrews is.
Got it.
Whoever is like.
But we know that the author is speaking to
Hebrews.
The Hebrews,
yeah.
Possibly the Jews.
Yeah, Jews are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Jews. Yes. Good.
Jews are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Jews.
Yes. So think about it this way. Abraham had how many sons? He had plenty
Abraham
sons.
had many sons.
Right?
Trick question. That's like
He had plenty sons.
He had
Abraham was
he had
referred to
two.
as Abraham the Hebrew. So technically,
He had two sons.
all the descendants of Abraham are
Oh
Hebrew.
my God!
Technically, right? But let's not go there. In
Tell him
biblical
something nice.
terms, they're really they're referring to all the children of Jacob. In biblical terms, all the children of Jacob are Hebrews.
But Ishmael was his son too.
But Ishmael was his son too,
yeah.
right? Well, it was Abraham's son, not Jacob's son, right? So Hebrews are all of the children of Jacob for biblical purposes, for the purposes of this book. It's a more narrow term referring to the children of Jacob, all of them. The Jews are a subset of that because the Jews are the children of Judah and Benjamin, the southern kingdom that was left after the northern kingdoms were taken away into
Solomon.
into captivity by the Assyrians.
Mhm.
So they are Hebrews too, but they are not Jews, because Jews became the term to describe those people from Judah and Benjamin. Right? Does that make sense, Trisha?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm quiet because I'm literally trying to type as you're telling me, because one of the things that I'm running across is in trying to get into these texts, especially like this, which I'm glad you guys brought up because I had tons of questions about this, and going through like Isaiah, like wanting to know what the historical context was around what was going on, because it's kind of hard for me to assess what's going on without not knowing what was happening at the
Next
time.
year this time, so you'll have it because the way the reading plan goes, it follows the story so that it makes sense. It follows the story. If you just read the Bible in its order, you could get very lost. But the Old Testament, our reading plan actually walks you through the story so you can get the picture.
You just gotta make sure you read every day, because that joint will skip around.
Yeah, it does. And I noticed that
But
because I actually didn't get a chance to read. For this reading session, I'm missing Isaiah from like 62 to 66, and then the Hosea piece, which I'm gonna catch up on because I want to. But what I've been doing, just a question, I didn't mean to interrupt because I really want to hear what you have to say. I've been reading different versions, like side by side, to try to get whatever the author's trying to say. Is that something that you think is
Yes. I would
helpful?
actually, first time around, probably read the New Living Translation just for understanding.
So I've been going back through, I've been doing a few of them. I've been doing a New Living Translation. Let me save this and go back because they're all right up here. I don't know why I'm trying to memorize it when it's in front of me. But I've been doing the New Living Translation, Common English Bible, the Message, Amplified Bible, and New King James Version. Depending on which one it is, I'll go back and forth. But like, if I really can't understand it, I'll go to Common English or Message to see what's being said.
So it depends on your objective. And this is one of the things that we kind of have been able to process through as people land on their preferred reading versions. Different Bibles have different places on a translation spectrum. You have those that are trying to translate word for word, which don't always make sense when you try to read it. And then you have Bibles that are written in Old English, which also don't make sense to us because it's a whole different language. And then you have those modern translations that paraphrase like the Message. And then in between, you have a whole lot of other things that are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
The New Living Translation is one of the easiest to read if all you're trying to do is make sense of what's being said.
Well,
Not
I
to do any kind of doctrinal study. If you just want to grasp the idea and the message, New Living Translation is one of the easiest. Another one is the Good News Bible, is also easy to read like that. And is another one like that. Common English as well.
It doesn't always help for every single text, but I find that sometimes I prefer the way that it's stated in one Bible versus the other. Like one for me, I feel like will be a little bit more clear than the other. But it was just a question.
Yeah, depending on what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to understand New English, New Living Translation is a good starting place. I would not recommend it as your study Bible, but I would recommend it as a reading Bible to make.
So, what would you recommend as a study Bible?
I would say the New American Standard Bible is a good study Bible. The NASB is a good study Bible. I would say the ESV is a good study Bible, the English Standard Version.
I would the Amplified.
Amplified is a supplement Bible. I wouldn't. That's difficult to read on a day-to-day basis, but it's a good reference while you're reading.
Yeah,
it can be a little cumbersome if you're just.
I don't think so. I like it because when I read it, it'll give me an explanation right beside it, and it'll tell me like what's going on. So it's been super helpful. That's one of the versions I've been using.
It's hard to read.
It's hard to read. Like if you're reading a story and it's amplified, it gets hard to read.
It's impossible.
But if you're reading something else and you want clarity, you go to it. You can reference a verse or a section of verses, and it will help clarify what's being said. But it's just hard to read.
Well, I'm saying the Amplified as a study. Would you recommend?
I recommend it as a study resource. I wouldn't recommend it as a primary reading Bible just because it's hard to read.
Yeah.
So there's like 4 different versions of the Good News Bible on here. Okay, no, this says U.S. version. I guess I'll go with that.
Good news.
The good.
But like for just daily reading, those are good ones. For study as a main reading, I would go NASB, ESV, NIV. Those any one of those 3 will hit you, down. It will give you a fairly decently easy to read, but mostly faithful to the original language starting point, and then you can, use other stuff to supplement that.
Okie dokie, Smokey.
But to begin with, I really recommend Good News or NLT just to get the concepts understood, and then when you're ready to be more meat and potatoes, transition to another Bible. But what were we talking about? That I was going to say?
Melchizedek, the priest, the order.
We talked about the Hebrews. There was something else I was going to say. It was about studying. I don't remember.
You were saying that make sure we study the context of whatever it is that we're reading.
Yes, but there was a more specific point. But thank you for that jog. I don't remember what it is, so maybe it's not something we need to talk about right now. Yeah, I don't remember what it is now. All right, 10:04. Did you get the answer to your question, Maureen? Kenrick, did you get the answer to your question about Melchizedek? Or do you still have
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, he's mentioned, and very rarely have I heard anybody ever mention or talk about Melchizedek. And then I was here with my boy one night, and we were talking, and he brought it up, and I'd read it before, but like never really dealt with it. He would ask a question. I was like, dang, it's like this is what I think, but I hear you.
To be fair, there's not much in the Bible written about Melchizedek originally. I think the author of Hebrews writes more about Melchizedek than the author of
100%. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Melchizedek is like 4 or 5 verses, maybe in Genesis.
Absolutely.
He's a passing character.
Inconsequential.
That gets a lot of significance in this book of the Hebrews.
Yeah.
Because of what he allows us to illustrate about Jesus's role and purpose and significance. And
I think one of the questions you were going to answer was the different types of priests, because I don't think you answered that.
At
the beginning.
Did he?
Yeah. So it's really only one. So there's a.
Oh no, you did. You said the high priest and then everybody else. Never mind.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then priests of which God really is. Yeah.
Oh, I have a question that's in Hebrews. If you have time to answer it.
Depends on what it is.
It is, where is it?
You're out of time.
I was trying to go through my notes because I had a few notes in Hebrews. So Hebrews 9, was it 9? Yeah, 9:10.
Hebrews 9, verse 10.
Mm-hmm. And I had a question about that specifically because it was basically the verse is talking about like basically regulations about like food and drink and what we should be doing and like there being a new order and not being like caught up in those things. And my question was, does this mean that the the um the ritual that we have in church of washing feet, is that like obsolete or is that something that we should be doing?
It's just,
I was just
it
curious.
could be a long answer, but we could
This
do
is
it.
a long answer.
It could be a long answer, but I'm gonna try to make it short just because it's 10 o'clock, right?
Like it's 10:07.
Verse 9, chapter 9, verse 1 helps to answer your question.
9:1.
Now, the first covenant had regulations for worship and also an earthly sanctuary. So, the author of Hebrews is writing to people in the time of immediately post Jesus, right? 100, maybe less, between Jesus and 100 years or less, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's immediately in that time frame, right?
Right.
And he's helping them understand about the system that they are currently in. Now that's 2,000 years ago. And this is the Jewish worship stuff. What you're talking about is what's the word they call it? A ritual that was adopted by the Jews who are coming out of Judaism and coming into Christianity.
Okay.
And they have adopted this washing feet thing. Washing feet was not a part of the old Jewish ritual in the temple, because all this context that he's writing about here is what was happening in the temple. Can bear in mind his point is to say this is what was happening in the temple, this was the significance of it, and Jesus is pointing us to this. That's the point that he's making.
Mm-hmm.
But to your question, that particular act of washing feet is a uniquely Christian tradition that was done by these formerly Jewish people who became Christians. And we have adopted it and persist in it today because of the significance that Jesus gave to it when he did it with his disciples. Okay,
so my next question is something that I kept running across when I was reading Hebrews was basically and I'm not going to say this right, so please bear with me, but basically what I gathered was all these other men walk the earth and they were supposed to be fulfilling what Jesus did, but they weren't able to. And so Jesus came and he did what needed to be done. But there's also references about this covenant and how he came to fulfill it. So if he's coming to fulfill it, does that mean that what we know about or what we've been given in the Old Testament is basically something that we shouldn't be thinking about anymore because of this sacrifice? Because
that's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question because it's something that I myself has come up against, because in my background, so in my family, we have Jehovah's Witness, we have Adventist, we have First Day. I used to be First Day, grew up First Day, then my mom went to be Adventist. So there's like different versions of like what everybody feels like is truth for them, right? But one of the things that I grew up hearing when I was, attending a first church as a teenager was Jesus came to fulfill the law. So we don't have to adhere to some of the things that we used to adhere to. For example, my mother was raised Adventist. On my mother's side, my entire family's Adventist. On my father's side, they're First Day. And then there's some Jehovah's Witness in between. But we were the only family that were going to a First Day church, and we did not and I'm just using food as an example. I don't want to stay here, but we were literally the only ones that did not eat certain types of foods, right? Pork and seafood and things like that being like the main ones. And that was something that was told to us all the time. Like, Jesus came, he fulfilled the law in the New Testament, so we don't need to adhere to these Levitical rules around our diet. So it was real weird. It was real strange. But now that I'm reading through Hebrews, that question in my mind has come up again, because there's so many times where I'm reading and there's references to the fulfillment of this covenant, and he's come to fulfill that. And it's reading to me like you don't have to necessarily adhere to that because he's now the example.
A couple of things very quickly, and we can have more conversation about it. One, next year this time, so you'll answer your own question. Two, I think in the same book that talks about dietary restrictions, it talks about women having to leave their house and go and sleep outside when they have their period.
Yeah.
Any of the people who appeal to you to do any of the Levitical diet laws applied that law?
No.
No, we all put on our pads or whatever and went in our beds, right?
Right.
My point is people cherry pick and give authority to the Bible what they want.
Right.
And thirdly, as Cliff pointed out in the chat, the law and the commandment sometimes overlap, but they're not necessarily the same thing. Like Jews are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Jews. And that's a whole nother conversation that we could unpack and study another time. But I want to leave that basic idea with you. And so when we confuse the two, we end up with all kinds of ideas. And when we selectively extract parts, we also end up with all kinds of ideas.
Yeah.
So we could unpack it. We could continue to unpack it. I wanted to leave you with that. You will answer your own question by this time next year.
Okay.
Because what you will start to see is, particularly using this study format, you start to appreciate what you're reading and what's being said a little bit better than when you just read it and just extract stuff out of it. You see how
I didn't
not
extract.
you.
I just said, okay.
Not you specifically. I mean, you, us, people who read the Bible tend to, we read it and we just pull these pieces out. Or we read this out of the context, or we don't understand who was writing and to whom, and then make sense of that before we pull out what's valuable to us. All right. And so when you go through and you do some of that kind of the dust settles and it shakes into place. So I don't wanna shortcut that experience for you, which is why I'm answering the way that I am. All right.
Clip is funny.
Sorry. What's happening is that the chat keeps jumping up over your picture, so I keep trying to minimize it so I can see your face.
It's okay. I'm just laughing at the comments that Cliff is putting into the chat. He's funny.
So a little bit. You're probably gonna need to read it out for the people who are watching who can't see the chat. Yeah, because the law is not the commandments. I tell people to just eat what you want to eat. Just don't be upset when you die early from it or get judged by it. That's another point that I wanted to make. Some things are really, truly best practice, but not mandates.
There's a lot of best practices in the Bible.
Right? And
so I have a question about that.
Some things are taught as mandates and really just best practice. But you'll be able to distinguish that over time.
Yeah.
Kendrick then said the dead know not nothing and can't be upset when you die. And Cliff said he's just trying to live a little longer. All right. And Cleon there says, Happy Sabbath. What up, Cleon?
Happy Sabbath, Cleon.
All right. So we talked a lot today about Melchizedek and Hebrews and Matthew and community and relationships. Shake all of that stuff in your head. What are you going home with? What you going home with?
This Bama show up now?
Yeah.
at the end.
He was working out the technical difficulties.
I've been here, man. I've been riding in the car the whole time. I just got home.
Got you.
It's better late than never, Cliff.
All right, Cliff. Well,
Better
since
late
you
than
were
never.
here the whole time, what you going home with of all the things that we talked about tonight? Since you was here the whole time.
Wow, gonna put me on the spot. Okay. No, I think the thing that stuck with me the most that is very important when you're reading the Bible to follow the whole cognitive thought process to make sure that we're in line with the story that's being told, because it's easy to be distracted. Like when I'm studying throughout the day and throughout the week, it's easy for me to get distracted and focus in on one or two chapters and miss the whole thought behind it. So I really like the point where you pointed out, the congruency of Melchizedek, because I was just like, I was confused about that a little bit myself. I hadn't all put that all together. But then when you went through it, you just made it seem so simple. And I was like, yeah, why didn't I see that? So, yeah.
Word.
One way.
Word. How about you, Courtney?
I think my takeaway really come from what we read in Matthew. I think as I was, in the after parts of us reading it, I looked it up. It seems as though it's like known as like the disciples manual, right? So with that, I take away from that, this is highlighting like the principles, like in the attitudes that was sort of, I think we could say is like the mark of the people, of God's people, and how important how much of a priority he puts on us getting along with each other.
Getting along with each other or staying together?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'll say that. I think you said it better. I think getting along will help us to stay together.
Fair enough. Carrot?
I'm not gonna say that. So
that'll be more fun. Man. Now we all want to know what it is.
Right,
like
so shy. What?
Share with the community.
No,
share with the class.
It's a distraction. Kind of echo what Courtney said. I mean, it's how throughout the entire Bible, God is very consistent. God and then Jesus is very consistent in making sure that we treat people well. Like we are kind, we're thoughtful, we go through the process. It's very, very important. And so it just, going back through Matthew 18 again, just highlighted that for me again, just how much emphasis he puts on just people and community and his people, his creation, and his community. So in our community.
I think mine is in the same vein. My takeaway is just the discussion that we had on Matthew 18. For me, it's just another confirmation that I need to be very aware of how I'm treating people, period. Not just the people I care about, but just people in general. Because like Jesus said in the text, like, there's no one greater or lesser. Everybody is equally important, and they should be treated as such. So it's just a reminder, especially with the pricking that I had today, that that's something that should be in my mind as I'm interacting with people day to day.
Can I share an idea with you?
Sure.
So love is the word that we use in the Bible because that's what they translate agape to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But love doesn't have an idea in English that agape has that speaks directly to what you just said. Agape has in its definition, the idea of active concern because we perceive intrinsic value in a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I perceive the value of God, so I have that active concern and show that active concern by the things I do. I perceive the value of the old white lady as being my auntie, my cousin, my grandmother, and so I care for her. But when I fail to perceive a person's intrinsic value, not the value that I think they have, the value that is inherent to them because they are who they are,
Because they
whatever they
exist,
are,
yeah.
right? We fail to love because we don't perceive that intrinsic
That value, yeah.
And I think one of the things that Jesus comes and helps us to do is to help us to see the intrinsic value so that we are better equipped to love. Because
I
it's
think that,
easy to love the people for whom we can perceive that.
yeah, and I think that's something that stayed with me because, as somebody who is Afro-Caribbean and a woman and, having to deal with people's perceived value of who I am on a daily basis, you would think that I would be more inept to that message and to be wanted and to want to like give that to other people, but it just wasn't instinctual. And so now that I'm aware of it, it's something that of course that I'm gonna need to practice on a daily basis. But that just, I don't know. I mean, I know I was very jovial about it, but it's something that really stayed with me.
Word. That's good. That's good. Jerry. Oh, sorry. Cliff said, "Sin introduce selfish." Sin, you want to make that, Cliff? You want to make that point yourself before we move on to Jerry?
No, go ahead. You kind of your last statement was kind of tying in with what I was saying. It just we'll talk about it later. Go ahead.
All right, Jerry.
Actually, probably in a after session, I wanna circle back to what you just said. But in terms of a takeaway, it's just interesting to me. God commands us to love, and he doesn't just tell us how to do it. He empowers us to do it, right? Once there's love, there's going to be conflict, and he commands us how to, or guides us, empowers us how to resolve that conflict. And sometimes with conflict, we have to set up boundaries, and there might be some degree of separation. But then once again, God being God, guides us, empowers us how to treat with that separation and give us grace for it. So it's we see this continuum where he is always being the example to us as to how we ought to be in our he in our vertical. He exemplifies how we need to be in our horizontal, and it's just yeah, I think it's encouraging.
Word. Lorraine, considering that it was your questions that kicked off our conversation today, that share with us one of the closing takeaways.
I think everybody said the other ones I had. So I will go with essentially just pause at the question. Because the question gives you context, right? So if you read the question and rush over the question and read the rest of the stuff, then you can, like you mentioned earlier, though they're valid points, it's not the point. And so you still missed a message, even though you got a message. So it's, just reminding me, like, you see a question, stop. What it follows it is going to be the answer to that question.
Most times,
yeah.
particularly
Right.
in the gospel and the stories of Jesus, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
that rule may not apply for all the other books in the Bible. Definitely won't apply for for Ecclesiastes.
Oh well, yeah, there's
apply
nothing
that rule in
like
Ecclesiastes, you could get confused.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'll be transparent and say the takeaway I had, I got in this conversation, and it's not, even though I may have spoken to the idea as if I knew it from before, I didn't see it till we had to read it today. I did not see that all the tidbits were before today, how passionate God was, or that he was making the point and illustrating the point of how passionate he was about the community. By saying, be careful not to cause these little ones to stumble, is a statement of, this is a big deal to me. These little ones are a big deal to me. Everybody's a big deal to me. I would go after the one because they're a big deal to me. You know, I'm recommending this strategy because it's such a big deal to me. And it's so much a big deal to me that if you don't want to forgive your brother, then I won't forgive you either, because it's such a big deal to me. And I need you to keep that same energy. So that is my takeaway. Keep my same energy towards the community is my takeaway. And I'd never seen that before today. So thank you, Lauren, for making us go through that exercise, because I saw it when I saw the connections, but I'd never seen it before. So word to you for that today.
Wow.
All right. I didn't see any takeaways in the chat, so I guess we could go ahead and pray to close out. We are a little bit over time, but anybody want to volunteer to pray for us today?
Come on, I close this out.
All right, cool.
All right, here we go. Father, once again, we thank you for your grace and mercy, for another session of Water for the Thirsty, where you have come into our community to try to introduce your community. And we're praying that we get it, that we understand it. May all the thoughts and troubles that we have be solved by you. May you guide us and lead us in the direction that we should go. May we hear your voice more clearer, so that we can distinguish between ours and the enemy, so that we'll come to know your voice intimately and passionately, to follow it explicitly. We thank you. We ask that you hear all the special prayer requests that were asked of you today, and that you will fulfill them. We'll be careful to give you all praise, honor, and glory. In Yahushua's name, in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Cliff, and thank you everyone for being a part of our conversations. Thank you all who were watching and tuning in with us. We're on again every first and third Friday, and we'll be on 2 Fridays from now. And that would be the 15th. We're on the 15th. And then we have a small break because this month has 5 Fridays. So then we'll be on again on the 6th of October. So we'll have a little bit of a break in there, the 22nd and the 29th. So that will be a 3-week hiatus. All right. If you don't already have a copy of the reading plan, which I think everybody who's on still does, but if you don't and need a copy, you can download it from the App Store on your phone for your tablet. You can download the PDF from the website, waterforthethirsty.com. Just Google Water for the Thirsty in your App Store, search it, and it'll come up, and you just look for the little logo, you'll see the branding, and you can download it. Read with us every day, and then come chat with us. Our conversations may feel a little random because we're jumping around, but we've all read, so we kind of already know, and so it makes sense to us. And hopefully, if you read along with us, it can make more sense to you. And then if you have any of the similar thoughts, you can throw them in the chat or hit me on the side, and we can, as you can see, we have at least 2 spaces here. We can bring you in from wherever you are, and you can join our conversation. Tonight, we have people who are not in the same area that I live in. We have 1 person who's out of country and 2 people who are out of state. Courtney, you're in Maryland, right? Yeah. So yeah. All right. But yeah. So you could stay in the comfort of your home, bring your little throw blanket, bring your little snacks or whatever. Join our conversation if you're interested. Even if you didn't read and you just want to chat, feel free to do that. Just hit me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and and we can make that happen. All right. Anything anybody else wanted to add there? And if not, till the 15th, drink up.
Woo!
See you then.
Yeah.
We're gone.